What's up guys, Jared again. If you've already seen John Wick 3, maybe you noticed the same strange phenomenon in the theater that I did. Specifically the audience's reaction during the movie's plentiful fight sequences, which go down everywhere from a New York public library to a conveniently placed glass hall of knives. Now, John Wick has never been afraid to take one or several dozen human lives as swiftly, efficiently, and nonchalantly as a quality sous chef chopping onions. But the deaths this time around were wilder and more intense than ever. And yet, they were also pretty freaking hilarious. Truly, I've never seen an audience simultaneously wince and laugh, but John Wick 3 just demands that kind of very unique reaction. This puzzled us and led to a lot of pondering about the nature of comedy and also a lot of arguing about whether the spine of a library book could really do that. We think we can locate the source of the film's strange, perhaps even sadistic sense of humor by looking back on the history of American cinematic comedy, more specifically, slapstick humor. So welcome to this Wisecrack Edition on John Wick 3, or are we sickos for thinking this is effing hilarious? And sorta spoilers ahead, but nothing too revealing. But first, a quick recap. John Wick is on the run with a $14 million bounty on his head because he killed this unpleasant crime lord and, okay, let's be honest, the details of the plot are not that important to any of these films. The only thing you really need to know is that in the first movie, some mobsters killed the dog John Wick's deceased wife gave to him. Since then, Wick has mowed down a fun array of gangsters in the name of symbolic doggy justice. Wick hits, maims, kills, and sasses a potpourri of stuntmen. He shows affection only to his dog. That's pretty much the whole deal, and it's amazing. In order to figure out why John Wick makes us lull, we're gonna have to leave it for a second and explore the black and white chaos of American film history until we find this guy. Meet Buster Keaton, famous silent filmmaker and bringer of the gnarliest stunts the 1920s ever did witness. Keaton, along with other greats like Charlie Chaplin and Max Sennett, are seminal figures in the history of American cinema, and specifically slapstick. Slapstick is a lazy translation of the Italian word bataccio, which is the name of this stage prop, a wooden stick used by clowns in the Italian tradition of commedia dell'arte. Even though the pieces of wood are thin, when you hit someone with it, the stick makes a huge noise without actually inflicting pain. That brings us to a main ingredient of slapstick, what Encyclopedia Britannica calls outrageous make-believe violence that is specifically comedic in nature. Scholar Andrew Stott also notes that slapstick is generally understood as physical humor of a robust and hyperbolized nature, where stunts, acrobatics, pain, and violence are standard features. Furthermore, slapstick is kind of mean. As Larry Langman explains it, it implies the use of physical gags aimed against someone for a laugh, and is decidedly over the top due to the improbability of the stunts. While broad comedy like slapstick has been around since the ancient Greek playwright Aristophanes put pen to papyrus, slapstick itself specifically materialized in early American cinema comedies. Characters in slapstick films went through a lot. We're not just talking about pies in the face, we're talking about buildings falling down, motorcycles crashing, people being bopped on the head with batons, the works. Buster Keaton literally broke his neck filming this scene and didn't notice until a doctor told him years later. So what does this have to do with John Wick? Well, a lot more than you think. The filmmakers even allude to the king of physical comedy in the opening scene of John Wick 2. Look closely and you'll see a Buster Keaton film being projected on the wall of this building. What's more, we see a Keaton film again in the opening shots of John Wick 3. It's as if the filmmaker is begging us to make this connection, so we will. But before we get into that, I want to give a shout out to this week's sponsor, BetterHelp, the online counseling service. If you've heard about some of the controversy surrounding the company, we have a full breakdown in our True Detective video. BetterHelp makes finding a certified counselor easy and stigma-free. They've even got some new features like Groupinars for people who benefit from group therapy, and teen counseling for people under the age of 18 seeking help. The sign-up process is like any other therapy service. It asks you a range of questions that can help match you with a counselor who has experience in whatever you may be dealing with. Once matched, you can book appointments around your schedule via text, phone, or video chat. When I tried the service, I spoke to a counselor named Jennifer, and after the session, she sent me some helpful resources. So if online counseling sounds like the right fit for you or someone you love, consider going to betterhelp.com/wisecrack or teencounseling.com/wisecrack2 to get 10% off your first month of counseling with a certified professional. And now, back to the show. Let's start with the premise of John Wick. A dude goes on a killing spree to avenge his dead dog. So on the one hand, we have these dozens of dead bodies, on the other, this dead dog. The filmmakers could have had Wick set out to avenge a dead wife or child. Instead, they have him avenge a symbolic canine representation of said wife. This is both kind of sincere and kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, well, because he stole John Wick's car, sir, and killed his dog.
By picking a dog and constantly leaning into the joke of it, the filmmakers heavily emphasize the absurdity, the sheer excess of Wick's response. Remember, slapstick thrives on excess. Then there are the frequent and weirdly hilarious references to Wick's puppy, to which he'll reply, deadly serious, that
wasn't just a puppy.
Having Wick's response to his dog's murder be so outsized and disproportionate doesn't just set a backdrop for humor, it also comments on the way some of our favorite action heroes tend to create an arguably unnecessary amount of carnage. Then there's the pure excess and absurdity of the action. Keanu headshots hundreds of people throughout the films, many at point-blank range. He kills 2 guys with a pencil.
I know, I've heard the story, sir.
Fucking pencil? Who the can do that?
He stabs 1 dude in the eye. He rides piggyback on a sumo wrestler while shooting him repeatedly in the head. And did we mention, the library book? The violence in the 3rd installment goes beyond its bullet-ridden predecessors and enters a whole new world of horse kicks to the head, dog bites to the jugular, and knives ramming into bald heads. It's total, utter insanity. Now, obviously, there are many differences between John Wick's badass avenging and Buster Keaton's clowning. Perhaps most significantly, characters don't typically die in slapstick movies. That adds another layer to why this particular modern brand of slapstick is completely cringeworthy and totally funny. To understand, let's look to your really basic cousin's favorite thinker, Sigmund Freud. Freud was totally in it for the lulz and loved thinking about the way humor relates to the unconscious. Specifically, he saw laughter as a convenient way to release the uncomfortable feelings that we keep pent up as we deal with awkward Thanksgiving dinners, awkward run-ins with our exes, and awkward handshakes when your fingers are sticky from eating a popsicle, etc. In his book Humor, scholar Terry Eagleton uses Freud as a jumping-off point for understanding the hilariousness of jokes dealing with death. He explains that death is one of those fears we majorly repress, given that it's a super significant, scary, and not funny thing. Thus, facing that fear directly through an on-screen movie death means having that repression momentarily disarmed, vis-a-vis Book 2 Spine. And it's perversely comforting. As a result, the energy we invest in repressing the fact of our own mortality can be discharged in laughter. Basically, laughing at on-screen death gives us a momentary break from being effing terrified of us or a loved one or Bill Murray ever dying. There's more to it though. Eagleton also notes that humor involves a brutal disregard for human value, a value that we nevertheless continue to cherish. We can dip into the senselessness for a blessed moment without having to sign on for some of its more frightful consequences. Because we give human life, particularly Bill Murray's, the highest value, watching a life be completely devalued is shocking and thus funny. Watch the way this guy's head explodes, or how this bodybuilding enthusiast falls backwards into the pool, or how this guy flies through the air like a rag doll. It's harsh and disrespectful as hell, and also kind of hilarious. But not every death in John Wick is funny. The dog dying is devastating. Certain characters get a little more screen time or emotional investment. Here's a moment where it might be helpful to consider a quote from filmmaker Mel Brooks. "Tragedy is when I cut my finger. Comedy is when you fall into an open sewer and die." We only laugh at the pain of others when we are effectively distanced from their internal experience. In John Wick, fight choreography and cinematography effectively treat 90% of the lives depicted on screen as entirely disposable, unworthy of even the mildest millisecond of reflection, much less grief. Take this moment. Wick swiftly kills 1, 2 guys, and then, out of ammo, shoves the muzzle into a 3rd guy's chest, giving said man an intimate view at the cartridge being loaded that will end his life. This moment is cartoonishly funny, forcing us to remember that each of these men is either dead or bleeding to death, while simultaneously adding in a brief gag that only highlights the complete disposability of this man's life. We see a similar gag in John Wick 1. These movies are basically Buster Keaton, but with headshots. So, in conclusion, by laughing at the deaths of John Wick's many opponents, we're not proving ourselves to be overly media-saturated, heartless sadists. We're actually following in the grand and sacred tradition of American moviegoers cackling at people experiencing horrible pain. So what do you think? Does John Wick count as slapstick? And is laughing at death a helpful way to deal with our overwhelming, paralyzing fear of our own mortality? Let us know in the comments. In the meantime, we're going to be Googling how to not die soon, please. Thanks to all our patrons who support the channel and our podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. And before you go, this video is brought to you by BetterHelp, the online counseling service. If speaking to someone on a regular basis is something you've been thinking about, BetterHelp is a great way to get paired with a certified counselor quickly and without any hassles. When I tried BetterHelp, I went to the site, answered a couple easy questions, and in less than a day, I was paired with a certified counselor named Jennifer. We made an appointment that worked with my schedule, and it was a great experience. You can communicate on your laptop, phone, tablet, through text, video chat, whatever is most productive for you. So if online counseling sounds like the right fit for you or someone you love, consider going to betterhelp.com/wisecrack or teencounseling.com/wisecrack2 to get 10% off your first month of counseling with a certified professional. And as always, thank you so much for watching, guys. Peace.